Parking Reimagined. Why updating our parking requirements is kind of a big deal. The county hasn't completely evaluated our parking requirements for more than 40 years. Much has changed during that time that has affected parking needs. You can see this yourself when you order goods to be delivered to your home rather than go shopping. While it is recognized that auto travel will continue and parking will be needed, our parking requirements need to be modernized to align with today's conditions and anticipate future adjustments. In our proposal, most of the county will continue to have minimum requirements that are generally consistent with today's regulations. However, parking innovation will be encouraged in our higher density areas. Today, most newly developed or redeveloped properties must include on-site parking. These are called minimum parking requirements, and they apply to just about every type of property. The county's parking requirements are listed in Table 6100.1 in Article 6 of the zoning ordinance. Minimum parking requirements are intended to keep all parking on its site, addressing a concern that a site wouldn't have enough parking and then fill up available curb space or overflow into other nearby parking lots. To be effective at keeping all parking on site, the minimum parking requirements had to be high enough to create available parking even during the greatest demand. It also had to be more attractive than other nearby parking options, free and plentiful, always and everywhere. Minimums assume that cars are the only way to get from point A to point B. This reinforces and deepens dependency on driving and parking. Minimum parking requirements were developed with the growing popularity and ease of car travel. As wider streets, highways, and freeways were built to invite car travel, dedicated parking to accommodate this travel was believed to be necessary. Minimum parking requirements was one component of a car-centric approach to land design and development. This has shaped how Fairfax communities were developed, and in turn, this increased dependence on driving from point A to point B. Fairfax County began to grow in the 1950s, shaped by car culture. It was first developed as a place for people to live, driving to jobs in other places. Development sprawled with low-density suburban communities in large subdivisions, and shopping and entertainment were linked by connecting roadways. It was a place designed for car travel for almost everything. Since land in Fairfax County was plentiful and relatively inexpensive, there seemed to be little downside to providing ample parking in new developments. And in fact, because autos were the only way to get around in the county, parking demand was higher. However, when you design communities for car travel is encouraged. This extra space also makes it more difficult to develop at walkable, transit-supportive densities. The space required to meet parking minimums significantly reduces the density at which new developments are designed. Parking areas are frequently larger than the buildings they serve and are designed to accommodate convenient parking. People who walk or take the bus to a destination must traverse and negotiate through areas not designed to accommodate them. Meanwhile, these parking areas remain at least half empty most of the time, diminishing their usefulness for other benefits. All this makes walking and transit less effective and mobility less equitable and safe for those who do not drive. Countywide, car-centric design began to put most destinations out of walkable access for most people. And for those who rely on public transportation for travel needs, reduced densities directly reduce service levels. Reaching the same destinations requires more miles of travel along ever more circuitous routes, complicated by parking lots placed in front of each destination. After decades of this cycle of dependence on driving and parking, surface lots take up a lot of space in our communities. Designing for auto travel has led to a continuing reinforcement of development options that caters to drivers above those who would otherwise be willing to walk, bike, or use transit to get to their destinations. High parking requirements interfere with opportunities to enhance these alternative modes of transportation and access that would provide a true alternative to driving. And these areas are rarely appealing places, especially when they are underutilized. It's undeniably convenient when parking is available right in front of our destination. But because of overbuilding, there are spaces that are empty much of the time, and those empty spaces aren't usually used for anything else. So when parking supplies are required to be much higher than average demand, areas in our community become places that are visually dull and feel underutilized. You might think to yourself, I wish they could put something better there than an empty parking lot. And all this parking is expensive to provide. Most people don't think about the cost of building and maintaining parking. They just want to know if there's free parking at their destination. But those 20 spaces at the back of the pharmacy parking lot that are never used cost at least $100,000 to build and thousands of dollars per year to maintain. And while building parking garages saves precious land, they cost more to build and maintain. It's at least 5 times more expensive when parking is provided in structures, not lots, and at least double that if the structure is provided underground. When the minimum required parking exceeds what is actually needed for a project to succeed, the cost to provide this added parking can prevent developers and business owners from opening projects that can provide a benefit to the community. These costs are paid by the consumer through higher prices for housing and goods. So in the end, everyone pays for parking, even when it's free. Those who build and maintain parking seek to recoup these costs in whatever way they can. Rarely does parking pay for itself. Therefore, the costs of building and maintaining parking are passed on to consumers in the form of higher rents and as part of the purchase of goods and services, even for those who live in the building but don't have a car or don't drive to shop at the grocery store. Right-sizing parking will allow Fairfax's walkable, mixed-use districts and transit-served districts to become more vibrant, equitable, and economically resilient. Many of our older communities and commercial mixed-use districts have been impacted by the unintended consequences of our parking regulations and suburban design. Diminishing the influence of parking is critical to reimagining these areas. People respond positively to areas that are walkable and bikeable, that have shopping and entertainment, and where they can live, work, play, and shop, all within close proximity. Many of our region's most popular destinations have these components. Providing opportunities to move away from auto and parking-dominated development allows the creation of more compact, accessible, live, work, play communities which create more chances for social interaction and inclusivity and provides travel alternatives that fit the form of the community. The county's planning goals in places like Tysons and Reston intend to create these communities, and Tysons has already built-in innovative approaches to parking. Reducing parking requirements will allow us to create more places where people want to be, such as the Cap 1 site in Tysons, the Mosaic District in Merrifield, Fairfax Corner in Fair Oaks, and the Reston Town Center. Right-sized and flexible requirements in key growth districts would enable more affordable housing opportunities. Reducing the cost of providing parking for affordable housing and more accessibly priced housing options provide greater flexibility and incentivizes the construction of this housing with market-price residential development. It will also be critical to leveraging a unique potential to realize our equity objectives by leveling the playing field in making homes, goods, services, and social connection opportunities more accessible to those for whom driving is not an option. More shops, services, and restaurants to enhance our neighborhoods. At the most basic level, better parking requirements will recapture more space for more placemaking, better street life, and more vibrancy and connectivity. More flexibility for business and property owners to respond to changing needs and preferences. This will also make established communities more resilient and responsive to change, reducing risks of blight, and creating more economic and social stability in these places. More sustainable tax revenue for community services and equitable mobility investments. And all of this is critical to keeping the county on a positive path to sustainable growth, as land is more effectively used in ways that generate more revenue to maintain the public resources that sustain our community.